Two, one. How's it going, everybody? This is episode 19 of the G&T show. Of course, Glenn and then Tony to me left here.
How we
We're
doing?
obviously we're not in the same place at the moment, and we're doing it remotely today. We have a guest on today, none other than John Morgan. How are you keeping, John?
I'm doing good, man. Doing good. Staying
Very-
busy. That's always a good thing.
It's very weird having a guy obviously from America, and of course the accent is different. I'm sure it's different for you from the same.
Yeah.
Just a quick background. Why actually we decided to get you on. So myself and Tony are huge MMA fans, always have been, always watch all the events. And myself personally, I was always intrigued of how the MMA journalism industry worked. Because I know there's a lot more to journalism than what people think, that you just go to a few of the press conferences and stuff like that. But it's a very busy lifestyle, and you have to put a lot of dedication to the sport. And we get a lot of these people on, like we get multiple sports personalities and stuff like that on who aren't recognized in our field. But I feel the MMA media as a whole isn't very recognized, because they're the ones that are providing all the information, like all, of course, all the dirt in ways as well.
Yeah.
So again, John, we thank you very much for coming on and taking time out of your day.
So what
Absolutely,
what
man.
what time is it in Vegas at the moment?
So 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's just right in the middle of my day. So I know you guys are
Crazy.
up a little later, but this is nice.
That's it. It's nearly
Crazy.
bedtime for us. It's 9
I
o'clock
think
here, so
yeah.
it's a bit. So after this, I'll be hitting the snooze button. So if you don't understand our Dublin accent, I'm hitting the bed after this. So without any further, I just want to get into, obviously. So obviously you're doing MMA journalism now. So were you always a fan of MMA, or how did it all start? Like, where did your love for MMA begin?
Yeah, man. It's kind of a long story, but I have been a fan for a long time. I really enjoyed the sport. When I was a young kid, I liked professional wrestling, and then I was about 8 or 9 years old and figured out it was fake. This is back in the days of Macho Man and Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant and all these guys. And then I figured out it was fake, and I kind of lost interest in it. I was like, oh, well, that's not what I thought it was. So I kind of lost interest in it, and then through a chance encounter, a friend of a friend. I was at Guy Mesger's. I grew up in Dallas, Texas, and Guy Mesger was opening a kickboxing gym there. This is well
Yeah.
before he was in the UFC. And he had a tape of Muay Thai actually from Thailand on there. And I watched it. I'm like, wow, that's what a real fight looks like. This is amazing. And so that just kind of got me passionate again about martial arts. And then, the UFC was born, and I was watching Pancrase as well over in Japan, and just really passionate about the sport. First UFC I ever attended was UFC 16, was the first one I ever went to live. So just really had a passion for the sport early on, but really honestly never thought it would turn into the huge industry that it is now. It was just something that I kind of liked. And later on down the road, obviously, I got to kind of marry my two passions of wanting to be a sports journalist and also being a fan of mixed martial arts, and kind of putting the two together.
Yeah, of course. And then, as you touch on it, UFC 16, and like you said, how the sport evolved, where it wasn't just everyone was just a well-rounded fighter. It was like it was pancreas versus jiu-jitsu and kickboxing versus wrestling. It was crazy. And seeing how the sport evolved today, it's really and the sport's only been around since 1993, 28
This
years.
that's
How much the
that's
sport
good.
has grown, and it's really it's amazing.
That's a good point to make. Now, Glenn be more, he'd know all the facts. Glenn's a real fanboy. Like, he's probably sitting in the house now in the nip from the waist down. So for this having you on. But how many people did attend UFC 16 that day?
Boy, it was small. The Pontchartrain Event Center. I mean, there was 1,500 people maybe at that. I don't think it was that big. And I do remember because I actually sat cage side, and I'll never forget because I paid like $50 to sit cage side, and like now, I mean, you can't even get in the
Yeah.
building for $50. You
Yeah,
know what I
you
mean?
wouldn't.
So it's
Gosh, that
pretty
for a
interesting.
beer.
Exactly. Now it's funny though. You talk about how early we are in the history of the sport. And I do think that's so interesting that I think people kind of forget sometimes. My buddy Gorgeous George Garcia of MMA Junkie Radio, he always says we're in the leather helmet era. Kind of referring to American football. How it wasn't that long ago. They're wearing leather helmets. You know what I mean? And that's where we are, the very beginning of it. So it is amazing how much it's changed. I mean, that's you know, it's cliche almost, but seeing Royce Gracie come in and showing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for the first time at a time when back then, you know, we thought it was all karate and striking, and that was the only way, you know, there was a Taekwondo gym on every corner in every city. And then to come in and see Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, man, it was mind-blowing, man. It really like changed the world in terms of how we understand fighting and how it really works. And it just continues. I mean, we see these evolutions even now, and now you're getting these kids that have been training since they were like 8 years old that are getting into the UFC that knew they wanted to be a professional fighter their whole
Yeah.
life. As you said, they're well-rounded. It's amazing to watch.
That's a good point because you were there from virtually the start. So, is there anything that does surprise you now that comes through the door? Because you've seen everything evolve from different aspects of the fight game.
I guess I think what surprises me is that there is still things we haven't seen. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like somebody comes up with a new technique. I mean, literally, you know, I mean, I've set cage side for thousands and thousands and thousands of fights. You know, whether or watched on TV, and you still see new things. You still see creativity. You still see new techniques that you've never seen, or a new style, or a new approach. And I think it's amazing to me that yes, we're early, but we have seen a whole lot of practitioners come through and a whole
evolve
lot
so much.
of and it's still there. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's cool to see how people still keep evolving.
And that's what I mean. And even at that now, there's very few practitioners nowadays who actually do like who are actually in it, like and now like 90% of people that are in the UFC now are well rounded and stuff like that, or even people who've come in from a wrestling background, but their striking is just unbelievable. Like for example, Kamaru Usman, who was a a Division 2 wrestler, wrestling brought and then just brought in the striking, and you think that he done the striking his whole life, which is crazy. Like and this is what I mean, and how the sport and what my point is how the sport evolved, and now it's this big billion dollar phenomenon now where even people like yourself can make a living off it. It's unbelievable. Like
Yeah, it really is. It's like you know, I always say again, you know, I was a fan of it, but even back then, so you know, I grew up playing soccer, baseball, basketball, and you know, enjoyed playing all of them, but realized, you know, at a certain point, like, well, I'm not going to be a professional athlete, but you know, still enjoyed being around sports, and so that's why I said, well, I do like writing, I like, you know, I like reporting. It's funny that's the journalism world has evolved. I mean, when I got into it, I just wanted to be a writer, and now like you can't be just a writer anymore. You got to do everything, you know, so but even then, like even going, okay, I want to be in sports, you know, journalism, and I'm passionate about MMA. Even at that, I never saw the two coming together. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? It was just
yeah.
this was this wild, you know, crazy out there thing, this spectacle, and now it has become a sport, and it is amazing, man. I mean, it's I've traveled the globe and I've seen it, you know, happening, and it is a sport that appeals to everybody. Now, of course, it's you know it's always going to be a little bit of a niche sport. Like there's always going to be certain people that just don't like combat sports, and that's understandable.
yeah.
But
Mm.
you know, across cultures and things like that, man, every culture has some kind of fighting in it. You know, it's the thing that Dana says, it's in our DNA, but it is. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Everybody gets it, and it's pretty cool to see the global expansion of it.
Mm. And
What's he like? Oh, sorry, Glenn. Sorry for coming across you. What's he like,
just
John? What's Dana like?
Dana's a good dude, man. I mean, Dana's good to get along. I think the thing with Dana is, if you want to make him your enemy, he'll be the worst enemy you ever had. If you want to make him your
uh
friend, he'll be a good friend. But you know, him and I obviously have had a relationship for a long time, and I'd say it's a good one. You know, I mean, look, we've had our moments over the years. You know, I mean,
Yeah,
we've had moments where you know, my wife is hearing him yell at me on the phone downstairs. She's like, "What in the hell is going on?" I'm like, "Dude, he is not happy right now. You know what I mean? He's fired up." So we've had our little moments of butting heads and stuff like
mm,
that. But overall, man, I don't think I don't think there's a lot of people that could have done what he did. I mean, obviously the Fertitas and their vision and their financial backing were huge, but Dana has done a lot to get this sport to where it is now.
of course.
yeah.
And then just as you're touching on it there with Dana White, and obviously he's of course both heads, but you never seem to get to that nearly Ariel Hawani saga of that he was actually blacklisted for a stage. Remember when he leaked Brock Lesnar at
Sure.
UFC? He leaked Brock Lesnar at UFC 200, and that was supposed to be a secret. Like, and it's really like it's mad how much even sports journalists are recognized with MMA compared, like in I know in Europe, like like obviously football would be the biggest sport in Europe per se, but the journalists wouldn't be as renowned or as recognized as the MMA journalists in the US, which is crazy.
I think MMA
Absolutely.
is a I think MMA is a very unique sport. And I always say this because you're absolutely right. It's true. I mean, it's crazy to me that I get recognized at events and people want to take pictures and whatever. But I would say, MMA is like that. Like the referees are like stars. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
Herb
yeah.
Dean gets pictures. I mean, you don't see that in any other sport. Like like football, as you said, or soccer, as I call it. Of course, like there's nobody waiting outside the stadium, like, bro, that's the linesman right there. Come over here and let's take a picture. You know what I mean? Like it's not that, but in MMA it is. It's like think about like Stitch Duran or
I
the
was about to say
Cutman,
him. I was about to say him.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. But like, bro, aren't you the guy that was carrying out the balls today for the team? Yeah, bro, come here. We gotta take a picture, man. It's the craziest sport, but it's been fun.
That's a Stitch Durant, but he's been around the block. He's been nearly at
Oh yeah,
every MMA promotion, even Elite XC. He was there. Remember to
yep,
go to Elite XC, Janie Mac.
absolutely.
So
It
just
is.
going into it as well,
Like a
obviously
referee.
you cover a lot of like media day with the UFC, and obviously you've been to the biggest press conferences. Any UFC press conference that I watch, you're always in them. You always get your head in there, which is crazy. In your opinion, what is the most entertaining press conference that you've been to in all the press conferences that you've been to?
Oh man, I mean, first of all, I'll say anything that gets done in New York, man, that Madison Square Garden
Oh
crowd,
yeah.
man, it's different because they're hooting and hollering and they're heckling the fighters on stage. It's just a whole different environment, man. So I always have fun anytime we go to New York. I would definitely say, especially early era Conor McGregor, man. I mean, Conor had a way about him where he just stole the attention. I mean, obviously the famous press conference where the who the fuck is that guy, you know what I mean? Like it's amazing like how many people could be on stage and yet he was able to get all that attention, and he had that. I think the latter stages of Connor's career have been a little bit darker, you know what I mean? And it hasn't
Yeah.
been necessarily quite as enjoyable. But those early ones, they were fun. It was just such a gift, you know what I mean? And he was
Yeah.
so quick-witted and it was entertaining. I always, point to Chael Sonnen. I mean, I think, people now are seeing that Chael really is kind of a good guy and obviously very educated on the sport. But some of the things that he would throw out there were always entertaining. So it's fun. It's you're there to do a job and you're there to get quotes for a story. But you can't help but be entertained by some of these guys as well.
Of
It
course,
doesn't
and
even
even
feel
at
like a
that.
job, does it? At times,
It's way more hours than people want to believe, but no, but it's an honor to be able to do it for sure.
Mm. And while they're saying that, while they're talking about the Chael Sonnens, you're talking about the Conor McGregors, and then even touch on a Colby Covington, like it's like Conor has two different personalities. Chael Sonnen, he is a nice guy after he retired, and then you see Colby before the Brazil, you're a dump, you filthy animal suck. They're just personas, and that's nearly touching into the whole pro wrestling scene where they had a character and they don't want to break kind of kayfabe kind of thing, and then you'll see once they get to the latter stages of the career, you'll see the person that they really are. Which is kind of going into the opinion about Colby Covington. Like he was going to get released if he didn't change his ways. So as much as people people think he's a prick or whatever,
he
he
has to
just
do it.
done what was best for his career.
Yeah, 100%. I've been covering Colby's career from the start in the UFC. His actually debut was in Macau, and I was there. I don't remember if it was a Tough China finale or what it was, but I remember there weren't a lot of English speaking fighters on the card. So even though he was making his debut, even though it was very early in his career, we did an interview with him because we're there to create content. And right away, I enjoyed following his career because he was such a nice guy, man. He was always very professional. Behind the scenes, he'll show up on time, he'll show up early. He'll be very polite, and then as soon as you turn that red light on, it goes nuts. But it didn't, as you said, it didn't start that way, and he kind
Mm,
of started to adjust. But you really can't blame him. I mean, the guy was
mm,
winning fights, but because maybe his style isn't as easy to sell, he's
mm,
not a knockout artist. He's more of a wrestling based guy. people weren't really necessarily tuning into his matches, so he had to get a little bit creative with it. And look, that's part of this business. That's part of being successful and making money here, right? Is that, you know, in the way that we say MMA is unique, this is another way that it's unique, is that just winning and losing isn't enough. You know, in most sports, sure, you know, you may create some, you know, endorsement opportunities or whatever the case may be, but as far as athletic success, you win, you move up, you perform well, you keep going. That doesn't necessarily happen here. You got to make people care, and whether that's because they support you and they want to cheer you, or whether it's because they hate you and they want to see you get your ass kicked, it doesn't matter. As long as they're willing to pay down, you know, the $60 for the pay-per-view, you're getting paid. So yeah, Colby, you know, as you said, it's a persona, man. And behind the scenes, he's actually, you know, a pretty good dude. But as we see with, you know, the whole American Top Team feuds, you got to be careful sometimes. You know, just because you say something on camera and it's part of a, you know, a shtick or a part of a, you know, a persona, that doesn't mean you have free license to just say whatever the hell you want and don't expect to face some repercussions as well. So you got to be willing to face the repercussions also.
Well, that's it. He turned a lot of heads. He made a lot of enemies. The likes of, obviously, Jorge Masvidal, Poirier, Amanda Nunes, Joanna Jędrzejczyk. They all just turned on him, and it's just, but from his media antics, which obviously you're gonna have to pay the piper, as we say in Ireland, like pay the price when you do it. But at the same time, like, he was a top 10 fighter on the verge of being released, but now he's obviously, in terms of trash talk, like he could be obviously one of the highest pay-per-view draws in the UFC right now, just for putting on this persona.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, John, quick review. Sorry, sorry, I couldn't get a question. Do you think it's going down the WWE route where you need to create a character to have that longevity in the sport, nearly, in some aspects? I know we touched on it a little bit, but do you think it's going down that route of characterization in certain people where they have to have the front to attract numbers? And
listen, I don't think you have to be as out there as Kobe is. You know what I mean? I think there's ways to do it, but you definitely do have to kind of let your personality shine through. You know, normally what we say is, you know, you kind of take yourself but turn it up to 11 a little bit. You know, and let that character kind of come through a little bit. I don't think it has to be in the way Colby Covington is doing, but I think you do got to sell a little something to get people excited, to get people enticed, because that's what I mean. Personalities drive it. You know what I mean? And like I said, whether it's because they relate to you or it's because whether they can't stand you, it doesn't matter. It's going to get you noticed. It's funny because in the beginning, you know, you talk about eras, generations, and evolution. In the beginning, I used to be very, very much against anything that resembled, you know, kind of pro wrestling-esque promotion and practices. But the main reason for that was because, you know, in the early days, that's when people didn't even know if this really was real. You know, you'd have people ask, you know, I don't even know if you guys know that. You guys are young fellas. You might not remember an old man like me, but people would be like, you know, you know, that's why they had to start using, like, as real as it gets as a tagline, because people are like, are those actual fights or are those fake? Like, no, they're actual fights. And so because of that, I used to be very protective about anything that looked too much like professional wrestling. But I think we've gotten past that now. I think people understand these are not staged exhibitions. These are actual real fights with real consequence. And now, if you want to kind of bring back in that entertainment side a little bit to get people fired up, to get people interested, I think it's okay.
And that's why I always say, if they say they think MMA is fake, I tell them to watch Robbie Lawler versus Rory McDonald.
There you go.
There you go.
Be like, if it's fake, maybe you get these guys
fake.
some Oscars right now, because they're the best actors I've ever seen in my life.
And I'm not sure. Did you see that fight, McGregor Mendes, the co-main event?
McGregor,
yeah, of course.
You're talking to me?
Yeah. Did you see that one?
Yeah.
That's what I mean. You have to, like, you know, like, if anyone thinks it's fake, you watch that fight, and then they'll shut up. And then just going into as well, I kind of want to just go on the topic of, like, obviously we're talking about the UFC now, but there's obviously boxing is starting to creep in again, and bare knuckle fighting championship is starting to really kick on as well. Now, boxing, in my opinion, it went a bit dead for a while, and the UFC kind of started to overtake it, but now you can kind of see it go back on the rise again. Do you cover much boxing events yourself, or if you don't, would you ever look into going into it?
I don't cover a lot of boxing, and that's because basically, well, there's two reasons. Number one, the UFC keeps me busy enough that there's really not a lot of Saturdays free, so I'm kind of tied up with the UFC and the other mixed martial arts promotions. But I also, don't cover it because I'll be honest, I've been to a couple boxing matches. I have gone to a couple big fights, Mayweather, some Pacquiao, because I wanted to see what it felt like. I wanted to see, if I'm talking about the two sports and the differences between, I wanted to feel what it was like and to understand what those big events were like. So I've covered a handful of them, but I definitely don't consider myself, the expert historian. I mean, I could go write about it if I wanted to, but I wouldn't feel like I was really bringing as much to the table for the reader in terms of, historical analysis and historical reference. But so I don't get to cover much. I still, I'll tune in if there's a big fight on and I don't happen to be working, whatever. I have a tremendous respect for the art of boxing as well. I mean, obviously a very fantastic sport. It's specialists in what they do, man. The angles, the hand speed, it's beautiful to watch. So a fan of boxing, but don't really get to cover as much because I'm just so in depth with mixed martial arts.
This is another argument, obviously jumping back to MMA again, and then you see a lot of like MMA champions like Usman won the challenge, Canelo, and obviously Khabib and Mayweather, like, and they say, oh, I could compete with these in boxing. If you look deep into a boxing match and you see the skills that these lads have, they couldn't stand a chance. And it's mind-boggling that even these are professional fighters that they need to know this. You know what I mean? I'm a fan of them saying this.
Well, it's funny, like, for instance, Francis Ngannou wanting to go box Tyson Fury right now. I'm so torn on that in terms of where I stand, because to be honest with you, I don't think it would be much of a fight. It's two completely different sports. In the same way that if Tyson Fury came to the UFC, he also wouldn't be competitive. It's just the way it is. It's two completely different sports. So it's on the one hand, I don't think it would be a competitive fight. It's not something that I really want to see, but at the same time, if Francis can actually go over there and cash like a $35-40 million check, how can you begrudge him the opportunity of doing that?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So I'm torn on it. I don't really want to see it, but at the same time, if it's going to make him, life-changing type money, how can you argue with it?
But it's nearly like, almost, see, when Tyron Woodley fought Jake Paul, it was like, obviously he was already on a 4-fight skid before he went and fought Jake Paul, and then obviously he lost the decision, which was very controversial, and then he got knocked out. He got knocked out in the second fight in traumatic fashion. Going over the boxing against Jake Paul, I think that tarnished his legacy. So that's kind of the risk that these lads are taking, unfortunately, because I don't care what anyone says, it did tarnish Tyron's legacy.
Do you think it's disrespect towards the UFC or to MMA in general?
Listen, I mean, I think it's two different sports, and so I feel bad. It's one of those things where, okay, like, it ruined Tyron Woodley's legacy, right? But guess what? When the mortgage payment comes due, try to pay your mortgage payment with some legacy. You know what I mean? Like, hey, Mr. Landlord, I know I'm 3 months behind on my rent, but have you seen my legacy, man? It's something special. No, it doesn't matter. You got to get paid. So I can't begrudge him, but it is hard to disassociate. But that happens even in MMA. I mean, take a look at like Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva, I mean, obviously, to somebody that's followed the sport forever, one of the greatest to ever do it. I mean, arguably the greatest of all time. I have John Jones as the greatest of all time, but I think Anderson Silva in his prime was an absolute killer. But there's a whole generation of fans that only saw the tail end of his career, right? I mean, that are probably like, why do you guys revere this man? You know what I mean? But it's like, no, hold on, you didn't see it, and so it happens everywhere.
Yeah, like, just as you're saying, John Jones is the greatest
You're
of
not
all
a fan
time.
of him, Glenn, are you?
This is a touchy subject. Now, I would contest that John Jones he's not the greatest of all time. But obviously, everyone has their own opinions. You're always going to get your little back and forth. But he did this and he did this. But his past, and obviously his failed drug test, kind of has me questioning. I don't doubt his ability whatsoever. He was very good in all his previous fights between 2011 and 2015. He was brilliant, and he would say he's the greatest of all time if he had a clean slate. But I just think, looking back on my last 10 years of being a fan, I would say Khabib. I know he didn't face much competition, but he just looked invincible.
Look, it's hard to argue with 29-0. You know what I mean? If the man never lost, how can you say? So it's certainly an argument that we made. I think what you touched on, then the argument is, but he didn't do it at a championship level for an extended period of time. Whereas John Jones became the youngest champion in UFC history and then absolutely dominated the division. And to me, that's what I look at when I'm talking about all-time greatness. I'm talking about like a duration of dominance, man. When you absolutely own a division, like, you know, the whole, obviously Conor McGregor brought in the champ era, and I think it's an amazing accomplishment. Like I will literally never forget that image of him in Madison Square Garden, you know, a belt over each shoulder. I mean,
Two belts,
it's an
yeah.
icon. It's an iconic image, man. It really is. And it was such a special accomplishment. And that performance, I mean, let's not even talk about how amazing that performance was against Eddie Alvarez, you know, one of the greatest we've ever seen. It was amazing. But those are like snapshots in time. You know, that's like, okay, yes, at this particular moment, you have done something incredible. But to me, when I'm looking at all-time greatness, I'm talking about extended reigns of dominance over a
Consistency.
division. That's it. You know, John has obviously done that. Now he's, and if he does it at heavyweight, my goodness, you know, what do you do?
Mhm.
But yeah, when you look at like an Anderson Silva, a George St. Pierre, you know, how long they dominated their divisions, I
Yeah.
think you kind of give them some edge. But all that said, man, what an honor it was to call Habib's career, and you're right, man. Just a dude. I mean, 29-0. I don't care. I don't care if you're facing 29 amateur fighters. You know what I mean? Like to go
Still impressive.
29-0, man. In this sport, you know, where anything can happen, one punch can change everything. I mean, Matt Serra can knock out George St. Pierre. I mean, no, it's an amazing accomplishment.
And this is what I mean. I think if we want to discuss our Mount Rushmore of MMA fighters, I think we're going to have to do a separate episode, to be honest,
Yeah,
because we'll be here all day. You
yeah.
know what I mean? So, but as I said, fucking that we could do that down the line another time. I hope you're down for it because I am as well. It gets me going talking about this. But just touching on obviously your UFC. So you were saying obviously it took us a long time to really like to negotiate a date to do this podcast because obviously you're a very busy man, which is understandable. I want to get into when you're doing fight weeks, like a big press conference. What is your day to day from fight week the whole week? Because I understand it's very hectic for you.
Yeah, the good news is the UFC, especially at this point, is a well-oiled machine. You know what I mean? They got their routine dialed in.
Yeah.
So normally what you'll do, you know, I live in Vegas, so obviously that's been nice that so many events have been in Vegas. I can just drive from my house. But normally what you'll do is you'll travel on Tuesday. When I was younger, I'd take the red eye in on Tuesday night and get up and work Wednesday. Well, now I got to get in and get some sleep, man. I'm old now. But so you'll travel on Tuesday. Wednesday is media day, so you know that's the day that you know they're bringing 10, 12, 14, 16 fighters back, and we're doing those separate interviews. So you know, hopefully at some point on Tuesday or maybe Wednesday morning, you know, you've done a little bit of research. I have to remind myself every week. I mean, obviously this is all I do, but I don't have a photographic memory, man. Like so, you kind of forget what was their last fight, but you know, I pull up their record, take a look. Okay, yeah, remember that. Okay, yeah, okay. Here's where we're going to the, you know, but get a little, you know, reminder of where they're at in their career. Maybe scan some social media and stuff and see like kind of things that they've been posting that they might be interested in that you
Latest
know will
stuff.
get them exactly things that they want to talk about. So you know, that's media day, and then you know, again, like I said, it's funny. I got into sports journalism because I wanted to be a writer, but now you're talking about like, you know, you're shooting video of everything. Now you got to produce that video. Then you got to, you know, put that video up on your player or YouTube or whatever. Now you probably want to cut some little clips out of that to put on social media for a little cut down clips. So I mean, that's a whole day. Thursday, Thursday is usually with the big pay-per-view events is a press conference. With the fight night events, it's kind of a day off, so it's a little bit easier. But you know, usually you'll have that press conference. You kind of got to go through that again and again. You know, you're going to have some questions, or whatever. But then you're also going to be shooting those face-offs and wanting to get that video up on all the platforms and social media and that sort of stuff. All that to get you ready for Friday morning. You got the official weigh-ins on Friday morning, so that's when you're, you know, getting everybody on the scale, seeing who makes weight. And then if it's pay-per-view, you come back in the afternoon. You got the ceremonial weigh-ins as well. You got the face-offs. So again, you got to, you know, shooting pictures, shooting video, putting all that stuff up there, and then you get to Saturday, obviously fight night, long day. What people I think sometimes do forget is like the fight's over. That's kind of just the start because now you got to go do the
Yeah.
post-fight interview. You got to get all those things produced, those pieces of content produced, and then travel home on Sunday, and then start it all over again the next week. Man, it's a
Hectic.
routine. It's a nonstop grind, man. I don't think people realize sometimes how much of it is, and you know it's wild too because the thing about MMA, there's no off season. You know, you talk about
No.
other sports like yeah, it's hectic, but there's going to be a couple months during the year where the season's off and you can kind of slow down a little bit.
Yeah.
Not in MMA, so
No.
it's nonstop.
And that's even as went through a pandemic as well. I think when the pandemic hit, the fourth event, the official lockdown, I think, in the world was like the 20th of March, and then the first UFC event after was the end of April. or the
Yeah.
first week in May was May the 8th, I believe. Tony Ferguson and was it Tony Ferguson? Was fighting Charles Oliveira. Was literally right during the pandemic, which was
It
crazy. And
was
this
it
was it. Is it 5 weeks off in the last 2 years, which is
and
crazy. And
and that
what you're
was
saying is obviously
I was gonna say that
like
was such a weird time. We did end up being up, but it was such a scary time because I mean, obviously, I mean the world was changing right in front of our eyes, but we didn't know kind of what was going to be the future of the sport. You know what I mean? It was that was a wild stretch. The whole COVID thing, going to Fight Island for the first time, and like you said, doing that Jacksonville card and just seeing it. Man, it was that was a wild where it was really I feel like we were really covering a piece of real history. You know what I mean? It was even bigger than the sport itself. You know what I mean? It was legit history with what was going on. It was a wild time, man.
like it was the only sport in the world that was still going throughout the whole pandemic. Like even I'm not sure. Like I know soccer here, like it stopped until July, August,
Mm-mm.
which was crazy. And then the UFC
Yeah.
were still managed to tip on, and this is like I'm reverting back to what I'm saying with the industry just didn't stop, and that's including yourselves, like as journalists, as fighters, everyone. It just did not stop,
I think
which
that's
is
where Dana deserves the credit, as you said at the start.
Absolutely. It was because you think, I mean, and now it's 2 years later, you're like, but man, at the time it was incredibly controversial. He's like, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna do this, and people are like, oh, how can you do that? I was always on the side of I think we should do the events. I mean, like people kept saying no, not until April, not until I'm like, what does a date on the calendar have to do with anything? Like what you have
Yeah.
to
yeah.
do is figure out how you're going to do it based on what we know at the time, with all the procedures and what was going on. And but it was wild, man. Like I said, like going to Fight Island and being met with like staff in hazmat suits, and they're like spraying us down with sanitizer and the bubble, and it was just a wild time, man. It was definitely something I'll never forget.
Course. So the next pay-per-view event is obviously it's on March 5th, which is obviously Colby and Masvidal. I just obviously I'm gonna go on to what is your prediction for that fight?
Listen, it's gonna be a big drama show all week long, man. We're gonna have, I'm sure we're gonna have, an interesting press conference and some interesting media days. You look, I think a lot of people in this world are gonna be pulling for Jorge Masvidal, and understandably so, man. The guy is a fan favorite. He's
Mm.
exciting, and he does have the ability to crack. But I think Colby Covington's wrestling is gonna be a problem for him. So I am picking Colby Covington in that fight. I know people don't like Colby Covington. But you have to respect the man's skills, the grappling skills that he has, the pace that he has, the fact that he can, go for 5 rounds. I mean, it's
Mm.
it's impressive, and I think just stylistically, it's a tough matchup for Jorge Masvidal. But Masvidal does have the ability to end fights with his hands, so it'll always, the
Mm.
start of every round they'll be on their feet, so there'll be some tension at the start of every round. But ultimately, I kind of lean towards Colby's wrestling.
And that's I know I agree with you on that point as well. And I think it's a case where we're gonna probably gonna see close on the embedded, and we're looking back on the old videos where Jorge is saying he's gonna end this man's life and stuff. And I think he's actually gone very emotional going into this fight because this is personal. And you've seen in the past Jose Aldo cracked against McGregor. He took it personal. That's just a prime example. And I think that's gonna get Jorge the most. And then obviously, like I was saying with Colby, is wrestling ability, and also he just has cardio for days. Even if you look in his fight
Hmm.
against Robbie Lawler, against Dos Anjos, I think his cardio second to none. I think that's what'll win him the fight. To be honest with you.
Agreed. Yeah, 100%. It's a tough matchup. I know the world's going to be pulling for Masvidal, man. He's a fan favorite for sure, and obviously Colby ruffles some feathers along the way, and I'm sure he'll do that this week as well. But I'm picking Colby.
Mm. Tony, who you got?
I just hope everyone has a great time at the event.
see, see, I am the MMA fan between the two of us here. Look, if you wanna show me your ways to be an MMA journalist, please. I will
I'm just
pay.
fascinated that this is going on with John Morgan. Anyone I've talked to in the last 10 days when I said we're getting him on, and everyone knew him straight away. I don't think you realise how much you're recognised in the city of Dublin. Like how
I,
much people like know you and admire you, and know the name and know the presence.
I
It shows
appreciate that, man.
your hard work has paid off.
Thank
And
you,
this
brother. I appreciate that.
And this one in, and the next time Bellator is coming to Dublin, come on down. You can come to my house, meet me ma. We have a few points, no problem.
I love it, man. I love it. Absolutely.
Of course,
I just
and
find it very surreal.
of course, and I just want to sign off on this and just say, thanks very much again for coming on. Obviously, I'm sure it was weird for yourself, us media lads interviewing another media lad who's going to be doing media. It's going, I know it's very hectic, but we really do appreciate your time, John,
Really
and
do, John.
thank you very much for coming on.
All
And
good.
again,
Appreciate you guys having me.
I hope down the line we can have an episode where we can just debate MMA for a full hour, and we can even turn it into like the Glenn and John podcast. The Glenn,
Yeah, I'll
we
just
can
sit
turn
back
into-
and make
we can
sure it
tur-
all runs
we-
smoothly, and we all have a
Ah,
good
he just cut you out. Just like you gonna put up with that, man. He just cut you out of the podcast.
Look, we're horny for MMA. That's just the way it is. You know what I mean?
No, John, it's really really great honor to have you on, and I got goosebumps when he came up. John is looking to get into the chat in the lobby and everything, because you're such an iconic face in the UFC leading up to the fights.
I appreciate that.
Really, thank
You're
you
more-
so much.
Yeah, and you're more than just a sports journalist. You're more than just a writer. You got your personality out there in the press conferences, and that's your name came to mind, and we wanted to get someone on, so we really much appreciate it again.
You got it, guys. You say all those nice words. I'll come back with you, man. It's all good. I appreciate it.
That's. I hope you have a good opinion of Irish lads now. I know McGregor probably turned you. I know McGregor probably turned you off a bit. But
We're all not like him. We don't hit outfits.
No, you know, it's funny. I did, I was at the Dublin event that Connor headlined, man. It was such a special, I mean, honestly, one of the most special scenes ever, man. That was an absolutely incredible week, and I had a great time in Dublin, man. It's a beautiful city, and I hope to get back over there. And yeah, even Connor, I mean, listen, it's been an honor to follow his career as well, man. One of the greatest stories in the history of the sport, to say the least. But yeah, he's the gangster side of him. I miss the 60 G's, baby, and 3 people died making his pocket watch and stuff like that, man. I miss that. Those were classics.
Yeah.
Just to finish, is that Brock Lesnar behind you on your right shoulder?
It probably is.
It is.
Yeah,
it is.
it is.
I
Yeah,
could
definitely.
see his eyes staring at me. That's
Forgot what
brilliant,
posters were back there, but yeah.
That's brilliant.
But we're gonna stop recording here, and we're just gonna sign off by saying thanks everyone for watching. And again, hopefully we gain a few American fans from this podcast. And again, to all our Irish lads here, John Morgan, you know him, follow him, you know where he is. Thanks very much.
Legend.
And
Thank you, John.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.